The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. "God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you." He turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels and his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct." The Gospel of the Lord. Good morning, everyone. As Father mentioned, I'm Deacon Ryan Mattingly, and I've been given the great honor and privilege of being assigned to Our Lady of Hope for this upcoming school year. So I'm very excited to be here. I've heard a lot of great things from all the Arlington seminarians. So I'm sure I'm going to receive many blessings by being here, and hopefully my presence here in my service can be of some benefit to you. So please pray for me over the coming months. You'll be seeing me around on weekends and hearing me preach now and then. And I've been praying and fasting for you since I found out I'd be coming here, and I'll, of course, continue to do that. In our gospel today, we hear Jesus' first passion prediction, the first time he tells his apostles and disciples that he is going to die. And Peter hears this, and he reacts very negatively to it. And in fact, he wants to stop it. He says, "God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you." And Jesus' response is pretty aggressive, it's pretty bold. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." And so a natural question we might have is, why does Jesus react so vehemently? And to answer that question, we have to know the context of our reading for today. So the immediately preceding sections of the gospel are the warning of the leaven of the Pharisees and Peter's declaration of faith. So the warning of the leaven of the Pharisees is a simple caution against absorbing the errors of the people around you, your culture, your groups, what have you. And then Peter's declaration of faith is when Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And this is the first explicit declaration of Jesus' divinity in the New Testament. And because Peter is the one who makes this declaration, Jesus says that he is the rock upon which the church will be built, the rock which the gates of hell shall not prevail against. And then in the immediately next section, our reading for today, Peter becomes Satan. So in the space of 2 paragraphs, Peter goes from the rock to Satan, which is a pretty quick transition. And the reason is because Peter has stopped trusting Jesus. Jesus tells him that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. At which point, Peter hears this, and then he contradicts the person that moments ago he had said was God. What he did is he let his worldly view, his worldly understanding of things, overcome his faith in the Lord. And I can imagine his thought process was something along the lines of, I really like Jesus, and suffering is bad, so therefore Jesus must not suffer. And thus, Jesus must be wrong, or he must be misunderstanding somehow. But the solution to Peter's conundrum is to pick up the cross. It's no accident that the exhortation to pick up the cross every day comes right after Peter's mistake. Because Peter, like us, needs to imitate Christ. And we know that Christ was obedient to his Father unto death. And so Peter must let go of his view of things, his understanding of how the world works, and be obedient to Jesus. Peter must conform himself to God instead of demanding that God conform himself to Peter. And this laying down of his will, this laying down of our will, which we must do as well, is the heaviest cross we can pick up. And we see this in our Lord's passion. So in the passion, our Lord is tortured physically, and eventually he's actually killed. But the moment in the passion, which we most see him in an inner turmoil, an interior suffering, is the agony in the garden. This is before anyone has laid a finger on him. We hear him in the garden say, "My soul is sorrowful even to death. My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." And his sweat became like drops of blood. And this is because this is the moment where Jesus made the decision to accept the will of the Father, no matter what it entailed, trusting in the Father. And Jesus could have avoided the entire passion, but he voluntarily picks up the cross. And once he's made that decision, we see through the rest of the passion that there's an inner serenity that develops from that. This voluntary cross of the will, this laying down of our will to pick up the will of God, is what distinguishes Christians from everyone else in the world. Everyone has external conflicts, no matter what religion or no religion they may hold to. Everyone gets sick, they experience poverty or conflicts or famines or natural disasters, whatever. But what makes Christians unique is that we choose to say yes to Jesus, to follow him. We become his disciples. And a fundamental part of being a disciple is undergoing a process of constant conversion. And conversion means that we must change. We must go from being more focused on the world to being more focused on God. Now, all of us have beliefs and practices about all sorts of different areas of our lives. They touch on doctrine and morality and politics and economics and our friendships and how families should be. But all of these different spheres of our lives must be formed in the faith that Christ has given to us. Now, unfortunately, we live in a world that has been tainted by sin, and each of us has also been affected by sin. And so some of these beliefs and practices that we have are incompatible with the faith that is given to us. And these same beliefs and practices have also often been inherited from our families and our friends, our culture, our country. And so they're bound up with our identity as members of these groups. And so they're a part of us in a very real way, and it's very difficult to let go of them when we realize there is a conflict. And so letting go is difficult, and this is why conversion is a struggle at the very core of man. St. Paul talks about a war being waged between the new man and the old man within a person. This is our own agony in the garden, where we have the choice to pick up our will or to lay our will down and pick up the will of God. And to lay down our will and pick up the will of God requires tremendous humility and a tremendous faith in the Lord that he's not leading us to a life of misery and despair. This is what it means to lose our life for his sake, because in a very real way, we have to die. Our wills must die. But our death leads to resurrection. The cross is not some weird Christian masochism, as if we wanted to suffer for the sake of suffering. Suffering only has meaning because it is geared towards something better. Just as Jesus' death was temporary and it was surpassed by a greater life, the resurrection, so is ours. And if we faithfully every day pick up our cross by laying down our will, then we're reborn into a better Christian, a more godly disciple, into a person who's better able to receive and appreciate the wondrous gifts our Lord wants to give us. And if we do this process every day, one day, please God, we will finally be formed into a glorious child of God. For the Son of Man will come with his angels and his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct.